"He's too old to marry you," mocked her family, rejecting her love for a man they saw as unworthy. But little did they know, this old man holds a secret that will turn everything upside down. He's not just any man, he's a billionaire CEO with more power than they could ever imagine. As their relationship deepens, she begins to uncover a world of wealth and danger she never could have predicted. And suddenly, everything she thought she knew about him, and herself, changes. Can love survive the shocking truth? And when her family's judgment puts them both at risk, will they stand together or be torn apart? The truth has been hiding in plain sight. Will it destroy them both? Tell me in the comments where you're watching from right now, and if this story speaks to you, make sure you hit subscribe so you don't miss the next one. The autumn sun cast long shadows across the polished marble floors of the Jameson estate, where Abigail Williams moved quietly through her daily routine. Her fingers traced the edge of an antique vase as she dusted, careful not to disturb the delicate arrangement of fresh flowers within. 23 steps from the entrance hall to the grand staircase. She had counted them countless times during her 3 years working in this magnificent house. Always move like a shadow. Mrs. Peterson, the head housekeeper, had told her on her first day. Abigail had taken those words to heart, perfecting the art of being present yet invisible. But lately, that had become increasingly difficult, especially when Matthew Jameson was around. The thought of him made her pause, duster suspended in midair. She could still remember their first encounter with perfect clarity. It had been an ordinary evening, just like any other, as she finished organizing the library, her favorite room in the entire estate. The wall-to-wall bookshelves reached toward the ceiling, filled with leather-bound volumes that smelled of wisdom and adventure. She hadn't heard him enter. "You seem to take particular care with the books," his voice had said, making her jump slightly. When she turned, she found herself face to face with Matthew Jameson himself. Not the stern businessman she'd glimpsed from afar, but a man with kind eyes and gentle smile lines around his mouth. "I'm sorry, Mr. Jameson," she had stammered, clutching the book she'd been about to replace. "I was just—" "Please," he had interrupted, raising a hand. "Don't apologize for treating books with respect." His voice had been warm, like honey over rough bread, and his eyes had held none of the dismissive superiority she'd come to expect from wealthy employers. That had been the beginning. Since then, their paths seemed to cross more frequently, in the library, the conservatory, the garden path. Each time he would stop to speak with her, asking her opinion about books she'd read or sharing stories about his travels. Despite their different backgrounds, conversation flowed easily between them, filled with genuine interest and unexpected laughter. Abigail's younger sister had noticed the change in her during their weekly phone calls. "You sound different," she'd said suspiciously. "What's going on with you?" "Nothing," Abigail had replied, perhaps too quickly. "Just busy with work." "Mm-hmm," her sister had responded, clearly unconvinced. "Just remember who you are, Abby. Don't go getting ideas above your station." Those words echoed in Abigail's mind now as she moved through the house, completing her tasks with practiced efficiency. Her sister's warning struck a chord with her own doubts. What was she doing, allowing herself to feel this way about a man like Matthew Jameson? He was not only her employer, but also 25 years her senior and worth billions of dollars. The gulf between their worlds seemed impossibly wide. Yet there were moments, precious, quiet moments, when that gulf seemed to disappear entirely. Like yesterday, when she'd found him in the conservatory, staring out at the rain. He'd turned when she entered, and something in his expression had made her heart skip. "Abigail," he'd said softly, as if her name was something precious. "I was hoping I'd see you today." They'd talked for nearly an hour, about everything and nothing. His childhood in a small Midwest town, her dreams of writing children's books, their shared love of rainy days and classical music. He'd listened to her with such focused attention, as if her words were valuable, important. Now, as the evening light painted the walls in shades of gold and amber, Abigail stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the estate's vast grounds. The manicured gardens stretched out before her, leading to the distant tree line where the property ended. Everything was perfectly maintained, every blade of grass in its proper place, just like the careful boundaries she tried to maintain in her heart. But those boundaries were becoming increasingly difficult to defend. She found herself looking forward to their chance encounters, treasuring each smile, each conversation. The way his eyes crinkled when he laughed, the gentle way he spoke about his hopes and fears, the respect with which he treated everyone around him. It all made him impossibly attractive to her, despite their differences. "Miss Williams?" Mrs. Peterson's voice broke through her reverie. "Are you finished with the West Wing?" Abigail straightened, quickly resuming her professional demeanor. "Yes, Mrs. Peterson. Just finishing up now." As she gathered her cleaning supplies, she caught a glimpse of Matthew in his study across the hall. He was speaking with his lawyer, his expression serious as they pored over documents spread across his desk. Even in this formal setting, there was something about him that drew her eye, a quiet dignity, a hidden gentleness that she'd come to recognize. As if sensing her gaze, he looked up. Their eyes met through the doorway, and for a moment the world seemed to stop. He smiled, that small, private smile that seemed reserved just for her, and Abigail felt her heart flutter in response. She quickly looked away, reminding herself of all the reasons why these feelings were inappropriate, impossible. Yet, as she made her way back to the staff quarters, she couldn't help but feel the warmth of that smile lingering in her chest, like a candle flame refusing to be extinguished. In the privacy of her small room at the end of her shift, Abigail sat on her bed and looked at herself in the mirror. Her mother's voice joined her sister's in her head, warning her about the dangers of wanting too much, reaching too high. "Know your place," they'd always said. But when she was with Matthew, she didn't feel like she had to stay in any particular place. He made her feel seen, heard, valued, not for her role as a maid, but for who she was as a person. The growing connection between them was undeniable, yet so was the complexity of their situation. She thought about how he'd asked her opinion on a new book acquisition for the library just that morning, how their fingers had brushed when he handed her the catalogue, how neither of them had pulled away immediately. These small moments felt significant, weighted with unspoken possibilities. But what possibilities could there really be? She was a maid from a working-class family, and he was Matthew Jameson, a man whose name appeared in business magazines and whose wealth was beyond her comprehension. The practical voice in her head, the one that sounded suspiciously like her sister, reminded her that fairy tales weren't real. Standing up, Abigail walked to her window. From here she could see the lights of the main house glowing warmly in the gathering dusk. Somewhere in that grand building, Matthew was probably still working in his study, his lawyer by his side, dealing with matters that affected thousands of people's lives. And here she was, in her modest room, with a heart full of feelings she didn't know what to do with. She pressed her hand against the cool glass, watching her breath fog the window. The estate stretched out before her, beautiful and imposing in the fading light. It represented everything that separated them: wealth, status, social expectations. Yet somehow, when they were together, none of that seemed to matter. In those moments, they were just two people who had found something unexpected in each other. The uncertainty of it all weighed heavily on her heart. Was she foolish to feel this way? Was she setting herself up for heartbreak? These questions swirled in her mind as she watched the last rays of sunlight disappear behind the trees, leaving her alone with her thoughts and the growing awareness that, despite all her practical reservations, her heart had already decided its course. The tantalizing aroma of pot roast filled Abigail's small apartment as she nervously adjusted the table settings one last time. She'd spent hours preparing her mother's favorite meal, hoping it might soften the inevitable tension she knew was coming. The clock on her wall ticked steadily toward 6 o'clock, each movement bringing her closer to what she dreaded most, her family's judgment. The doorbell rang precisely at 6, making Abigail jump. Taking a deep breath, she smoothed down her dress and opened the door to find her mother standing there, perfectly coiffed as always, with her younger sister Sarah trailing behind. "Something's burning," her mother announced by way of greeting, brushing past Abigail into the apartment. "Nothing's burning, Mother." Abigail sighed, closing the door. "The roast is exactly how you taught me to make it." Sarah gave her a quick hug, whispering, "Brace yourself. She's been talking about this dinner all week." The three women settled around Abigail's small dining table, the good china gleaming under the overhead light. For a few minutes, there was only the quiet clinking of silverware and the passing of dishes. Abigail allowed herself to hope that maybe, just maybe, they could get through one meal without confrontation. "So," her mother said, carefully dabbing her mouth with a napkin, "I hear you've been spending quite a bit of time with that Jameson man." And there it was. Abigail's fork paused halfway to her mouth. "His name is Matthew, Mother." "Matthew," her mother repeated, as if the name left a bad taste in her mouth. "And exactly what are your intentions with this gentleman?" Sarah snorted into her water glass. "Gentleman? He's practically old enough to be her father." "He's 58, Abigail defended, feeling her cheeks grow warm. "And age is just a number." "Just a number?" Her mother's voice rose sharply. "He's too old for you, Abigail. What kind of future could he possibly offer?" Abigail set her fork down, trying to keep her voice steady. "Matthew is kind, intelligent, and treats me with respect. That's more than I can say for the men my age you've tried to set me up with." "Oh, please." Sarah rolled her eyes. "He's just a lonely old man looking for someone to take care of him in his declining years. Is that really what you want for yourself?" The words stung, making Abigail's eyes burn with unshed tears. "You don't know him. You haven't even tried to get to know him." "I know enough," her mother declared, pushing her plate away. "I know he's got you cleaning his house like some kind of servant, and now he's trying to take advantage of your good nature." "I'm not a servant, Mother. I'm his housekeeper, and it's an honest job." Abigail's voice trembled with emotion. "And he's never taken advantage of me. He sees me for who I am." Sarah leaned forward, her expression softening slightly. "Abby, we're just worried about you. Think about it. What happens when he gets older? When he needs constant care? When his children start fighting over his money?" "He doesn't have children," Abigail protested weakly. "Even worse," her mother interjected. "No family to speak of. What kind of man his age doesn't have a family?" The remainder of dinner passed in a blur of critical comments and thinly veiled insults. Each word felt like a small cut, death by 1,000 paper cuts to Abigail's heart. She barely tasted the food she'd spent hours preparing, managing only to push it around her plate while her family continued their assault on her choices. After Sarah left, Abigail found her mother in the kitchen, aggressively washing dishes that didn't need washing. Taking a deep breath, she decided to make one last attempt at understanding. "Mother, can we talk? Please?" Her mother turned, drying her hands on a dish towel. "If you're going to try to convince me about that man, just listen." Abigail interrupted, gathering her courage. When I'm with Matthew, I feel seen. Not as a housekeeper, not as someone's daughter or sister, but as me. He values my opinions, asks about my dreams. We talk about books and art and life. Dreams won't pay the bills, Abigail. Her mother cut in. Dreams won't protect you when he's gone and you're left alone. I'm trying to protect you from making a terrible mistake. But what if it's not a mistake? Abigail's voice cracked. What if this is something real and beautiful, and I'm missing out because I'm too afraid of what everyone else thinks? Her mother's expression softened slightly, but her words remained firm. Love isn't enough, sweetheart. Trust me, I know. You need security, stability, a future you can count on. What happens when he dies? When you're a widow at 40? Have you thought about that? Abigail hadn't thought about that, and the question hit her like a physical blow. I don't know, she admitted quietly. Exactly. Her mother patted her cheek. You're my daughter, and I love you too much to watch you throw your life away on an impossible dream. Later that night, after her mother had finally left, Abigail lay in her bed, staring at the ceiling. The words from dinner played on repeat in her mind, mixing with her own doubts and fears. She thought about Matthew's gentle smile, the way his eyes lit up when she entered a room, the depth of their conversations. Then she thought about her mother's warnings, her sister's mockery, the weight of their disapproval. Tears slipped silently down her cheeks as she turned onto her side, hugging her pillow close. She loved her family, valued their opinion, wanted their support. But the thought of giving up what she had with Matthew made her chest ache with a pain she couldn't ignore. She was trapped between her heart's desires and her family's expectations, with no clear path forward. Sleep eluded her as she wrestled with the choice before her. Should she listen to her family's practical concerns and protect herself from potential heartbreak? Or should she follow her heart, despite the risks and judgment? The questions swirled in her mind, leaving her exhausted but no closer to an answer as the night wore on. The morning sun cast long shadows across Abigail's bedroom as she got ready for the day. Her fingers trembled slightly as she buttoned her blouse, still shaken from the previous night's dinner. Yet something inside her felt different, stronger, more determined. She needed to see Matthew, to remind herself why she was willing to face her family's disapproval. The drive to the estate helped clear her mind. As she pulled up to the grand house, she spotted Matthew in the garden, reading a book on his favorite bench beneath the old oak tree. He looked up at the sound of her car, and his face brightened with a smile that made her heart skip. "Abigail," he called out, closing his book. "I wasn't expecting you today. Is everything all right?" She walked over to him, taking in the peaceful scene, the carefully tended flowers, the gentle breeze rustling through the leaves, the quiet that seemed to exist only in this corner of the world. "I hope I'm not interrupting," she said softly. "Never," Matthew replied, patting the space beside him on the bench. "You look troubled." Abigail sat down, smoothing her skirt nervously. "I had dinner with my family last night," she began, then fell silent, unsure how to continue. Matthew nodded, understanding. "Ah," he said simply, but that single syllable carried volumes of meaning. "They don't approve of our friendship." "They don't understand it," Abigail corrected gently. "They see what they want to see. Our age difference, our different backgrounds. They don't see—" She trailed off, struggling to find the right words. "What we see in each other." Matthew finished for her. His voice was quiet, thoughtful. "You know, I've spent most of my life surrounded by people who wanted something from me. My money, my influence, my connections. But never just me." He turned slightly to face her better, his eyes holding a vulnerability she'd never seen before. In all my 62 years, I've never found someone who looked at me the way you do. Like I'm just Matthew, not my bank account or my social status. And I've never met anyone who sees past my job title. Abigail admitted. Everyone else looks at me and sees the housekeeper or the help. But you ask about my dreams, my thoughts. You listen when I talk about the books I love or the places I want to visit someday. Matthew's expression softened. Tell me more about those dreams. He encouraged. What does Abigail Williams want from life? She closed her eyes for a moment, letting herself imagine. I want to travel, she said finally. I want to see the world beyond this town. I want to write stories that matter, that make people feel less alone. I want... She hesitated, then continued more quietly. I want to stop feeling small every time my family looks at me with disappointment. You're anything but small, Abigail, Matthew said firmly. You're one of the strongest people I know. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the clouds drift overhead. Then Matthew spoke again, his voice carrying a note of confession. You know, I've achieved everything society says should make a person happy. Wealth, success, status. But until recently, I've been terribly lonely. What changed? Abigail asked, though something in her heart already knew the answer. You started working here, he said simply. You brought life back into this old house. Your smile, your kindness, your way of finding beauty in the smallest things. It reminded me what it feels like to truly connect with another person. Abigail felt tears prick at her eyes. My mother says I'm throwing my life away, she whispered. That I'm living in a fantasy world if I think... She stopped, not ready to voice the feelings growing between them. Matthew reached over and took her hand, his touch gentle but firm. Your mother speaks from her own fears and experiences, he said carefully. But she doesn't know what's in your heart. Only you can know that. As the afternoon light began to fade, they stood to say goodbye. Matthew hesitated for a moment, then stepped forward and wrapped his arms around her in a warm embrace. Abigail stiffened in surprise at first. They'd never shared such intimate contact before, but then relaxed into the hug, feeling safe and understood in a way she never had before. The comfort of that moment stayed with her until she arrived home, only to find her mother waiting on her front porch, face tight with anger. Where have you been? Her mother demanded as soon as Abigail stepped out of her car. I was at work, Abigail replied, trying to keep her voice steady. Don't lie to me, her mother snapped. Sarah drove by the estate earlier. She saw you sitting in the garden with him like some lovesick teenager. Have you lost your mind? Abigail felt her earlier peace crumbling. We were just talking, Mother. Just talking? Her mother's laugh was harsh. Wake up, Abigail. He's a nobody who thinks his money makes him somebody. He'll never give you what you deserve. He'll never be able to give you a family, a future. He's already lived his life. Why should he get to ruin yours? He's not ruining anything. Abigail protested, her voice rising. He makes me happy. He believes in me. Why isn't that enough? Because happiness doesn't last, her mother shouted. Because believing in someone doesn't put food on the table or secure your future. Because I won't stand by and watch my daughter throw away her life on some rich old man's midlife crisis. The words hit Abigail like physical blows, each one chipping away at the warmth and understanding she'd felt earlier with Matthew. But beneath the pain, something else was growing. A quiet, steady resolve. For the first time in her life, she didn't back down from her mother's criticism. Matthew isn't a nobody, she said quietly but firmly. He's kind and intelligent, and he sees me for who I really am. And if you can't understand that, then maybe you're the one who needs to wake up. Her mother stared at her, shock and hurt warring on her face. "I see I'm wasting my breath," she said finally, her voice cold. "But don't come crying to me when this all falls apart." She turned and walked away, leaving Abigail standing alone in the growing darkness, her heart heavy, but her spine straight. The day had started with hope and understanding, only to end in conflict and pain. Yet as Abigail watched her mother's retreating figure, she realized something had shifted inside her. The conversation with Matthew, his gentle support and understanding, had given her something her family had never managed to provide: the courage to stand up for what she believed in, even if it meant standing alone. The morning sun cast long shadows across the estate's polished floors as Abigail went about her daily tasks. 3 weeks had passed since her confrontation with her mother, and the tension at family gatherings had become almost unbearable. Every Sunday dinner felt like walking through a minefield, with disapproving glances and pointed comments about appropriate relationships flying across the table. Her younger sister had become particularly vocal about her disapproval. "You're living in a fairy tale," she'd said just yesterday, rolling her eyes. "Wake up and smell the reality check, sis. This isn't Pretty Woman, and you're setting yourself up for heartbreak." The words had stung, but Abigail had gotten better at hiding her reactions. She focused instead on her work, finding solace in the familiar routine of maintaining the estate's pristine appearance. Yet even here, she couldn't escape the whispers and sideways glances from her co-workers. As she dusted the antique furniture in the library, voices drifted in from the adjacent hallway. She recognized them as belonging to Mrs. Peterson, the estate manager, and Mr. Richards, the head of security. They were speaking in hushed tones, but their words carried clearly through the open door. "Did you see the papers this morning?" Mrs. Peterson asked. "Another merger announcement. That makes 3 this month." "Typical Jameson move," Mr. Richards replied. "The old man's building something big, mark my words, though he keeps it quiet around here, acting like he's just another wealthy retiree." Abigail's hand stilled on the wooden shelf. She knew eavesdropping was wrong, but she couldn't help herself. "Well, that's what makes him different from the others," Mrs. Peterson continued. "Most billionaires can't wait to show off their wealth, but Mr. Jameson, he's been running one of the largest private investment firms in the country for 20 years, and half his employees probably don't even know what he looks like." Abigail's heart skipped a beat. Billionaire? Investment firm? She'd known Matthew was wealthy, but this was something else entirely. "Speaking of keeping things quiet," Mr. Richards lowered his voice further, "have you noticed how much time he's spending with that new maid?" "Shh," Mrs. Peterson hushed him quickly. "That's none of our business, though I must say it's nice to see him smile more often." Their footsteps faded down the hallway, leaving Abigail alone with her whirling thoughts. She felt dizzy with questions. Why hadn't Matthew told her about his true position? Was this why he seemed so guarded about certain aspects of his life? Later that afternoon, as she was finishing up her shift, Matthew found her in the garden. He looked different to her now, knowing what she knew, yet somehow exactly the same kind eyes, the same gentle manner. "Abigail," he said warmly, "I was hoping to catch you before you left. Would you join me for dinner tonight? There's something I'd like to discuss with you." Despite her confusion about his identity, she found herself nodding. "I'd like that." The private dining room was intimate, lit by soft chandelier light that made the crystal glasses sparkle. Matthew had arranged for a simple but elegant meal, and as they ate, he began to speak about things he'd never shared before. "You know, Abigail," he said, setting down his fork, "I've spent most of my life building things, companies, portfolios, empires of paper and promises, but somewhere along the way I lost sight of what really matters: authenticity, real connections, the ability to be yourself with someone who sees you for who you are, not what you own. Abigail looked at him thoughtfully, wondering if this was his way of leading up to the truth about his identity. "Is it hard?" she asked. "Being successful and still staying true to yourself?" He smiled, a touch of sadness in his eyes. "Harder than most people would believe. Everyone wants something from you. They see the wealth, the power, but they don't see the person. That's why—" He paused, reaching across the table to take her hand. "That's why what we have is so precious to me. You saw me as just Matthew, not as a billionaire businessman," she finished quietly. He didn't look surprised that she knew. "Yes," he acknowledged. "Though I would have told you soon. I wanted you to know me first, the real me." The candlelight flickered across his face, highlighting the sincerity in his expression. Abigail felt something shift inside her, a deepening of the connection they'd been building. "I understand," she said softly. "We all wear masks sometimes, but with you I've never needed to." Matthew stood then, moving around the table to stand beside her chair. His hand gently cupped her cheek, and Abigail felt her heart racing as he leaned down. The kiss was soft, almost reverent, but it held a promise that made her breath catch in her throat. When she returned home that night, sleep eluded her. She lay in bed, replaying the evening in her mind. The tender kiss, the honest conversation, the way Matthew had finally begun to share his true self with her. Yet she couldn't silence the voices of doubt that echoed her family's concerns. Was she really ready for what a relationship with Matthew might mean? Could she handle not just the age difference that everyone focused on, but the vast difference in their social positions? The moonlight filtered through her curtains as she turned these questions over in her mind. The kiss had felt right, perfect even, but it had also opened the door to a world she barely understood. She touched her lips, still feeling the ghost of his kiss, and wondered what tomorrow would bring. Around 3 o'clock in the morning, she was still awake, her thoughts a tangle of emotions. The evening's revelations about Matthew's true identity mixed with memories of her family's disapproval, creating a storm of uncertainty in her mind. Yet beneath it all, one truth remained constant. When she was with Matthew, she felt seen, understood, and valued in a way she never had before. She finally drifted off as dawn approached, her dreams filled with images of candlelight and gentle kisses, of judgment and acceptance, of masks falling away to reveal truth beneath. The question of what to do next would have to wait for another day. The package arrived on a Wednesday morning. Abigail stared at the cream-colored envelope in her hands, her fingers tracing over the gold embossing that decorated its edges. Inside, she found an elegant invitation to the annual Business Leaders Gala, one of the most prestigious events in the city. Her phone buzzed with a text from Matthew. "I hope you received the invitation. Would you do me the honor of being my date?" Before she could reply, her younger sister barged into her apartment, having used the spare key again without asking. "What's that?" she asked, snatching the invitation from Abigail's hands. Her eyes widened as she read it, then narrowed with skepticism. "The Business Leaders Gala? Are you serious?" "Matthew invited me," Abigail said quietly, taking the invitation back. Her sister let out a sharp laugh. "Abby, come on. You can't actually be thinking of going. That's not your world. Those people, they're going to eat you alive." "Why shouldn't I go?" Abigail challenged, though her voice wavered slightly. "Because you'll stick out like a sore thumb. These are billionaires and CEOs. What are you going to talk to them about? How to properly fold fitted sheets?" The words stung, but Abigail stood her ground. "I'm going. Matthew wants me there." Her sister's expression softened slightly. "Look, I know you like him, but this is different. This isn't just dinner or a movie. This is his world, and trust me, it's not going to be pretty when they see him with someone like... Someone like what? Abigail challenged. Someone who works as a maid, Abby. I'm trying to protect you. Despite her sister's words, or perhaps because of them, Abigail made her decision. She texted Matthew back, "Yes, I'd love to." The next few days passed in a blur of preparation. Matthew had arranged for a designer dress to be delivered to her apartment, a stunning, midnight blue gown that fit her perfectly. On the night of the gala, as she stood in front of her mirror, Abigail barely recognized herself. The dress hugged her curves elegantly, and her hair was styled in soft waves that framed her face. When Matthew's car arrived, her heart was pounding. He stepped out, looking distinguished in his tuxedo, and his face lit up when he saw her. "You look absolutely beautiful," he said, taking her hand. The drive to the venue was quiet, filled with anticipation. As they approached the grand hotel where the gala was being held, Abigail's breath caught in her throat. Crystal chandeliers sparkled through enormous windows, and a red carpet led up the stairs to the entrance. "Nervous?" Matthew asked softly. "A little," she admitted. He squeezed her hand. "Just be yourself. That's more than enough." The moment they stepped inside, Abigail felt overwhelmed by the opulence. The ballroom was massive, with soaring ceilings and elaborate floral arrangements on every table. Women in designer gowns floated past, their jewelry catching the light. Men in expensive suits gathered in small groups, discussing business deals worth millions. Matthew kept his hand at the small of her back, a constant reassuring presence as he began introducing her to people. "This is James Chen, CEO of Tech Solutions," he said, presenting her to a friendly-looking man. "And this is Sarah Montgomery, head of Montgomery Industries." To Abigail's surprise, most people were polite, if not exactly warm. She managed to hold conversations about current events and even contributed to a discussion about sustainable energy initiatives, something she'd been reading about recently. When the orchestra began playing, Matthew led her to the dance floor. "You're doing wonderfully," he whispered as they swayed to the music. In his arms, Abigail felt some of her tension melt away. The way he looked at her made her forget about everyone else in the room. As they danced, she realized how deeply she had fallen for him, not for his wealth or status, but for the gentle soul beneath it all. But reality crashed back in as they were leaving the gala. While waiting for their car, Abigail overheard two women talking behind a nearby pillar. "Can you believe Matthew brought his maid as his date?" one whispered loudly. "How embarrassing," the other replied. "She clearly doesn't belong here. I mean, did you see how she held her dessert fork?" Abigail felt her face burn with shame. Matthew, who had also heard, turned to confront them, but she grabbed his arm. "Don't," she whispered. "Please, let's just go." Once they were in the car, Matthew took her hands in his. "I'm so sorry about that," he said, his voice filled with concern. "Those women, their opinions mean nothing." "But they're right," Abigail said softly. "I don't belong in your world?" "No," Matthew said firmly. "Love doesn't care about social status or bank accounts. What matters is what's in here." He placed his hand over her heart. "And what I see there is more valuable than anything those people have." Abigail leaned back in her seat, fighting back tears. She wanted to believe him, desperately wanted to believe that love could bridge the gap between their worlds. But the cruel words of those women echoed in her mind, mixing with her family's warnings. As the car drove through the quiet streets, she felt pulled in two directions. Her heart urged her to hold on to what she and Matthew shared, to fight for this connection that made her feel so alive. But her mind kept returning to the stark differences between their worlds, to the judgment they would always face. Matthew seemed to sense her inner turmoil. He held her hand the entire ride home, his thumb tracing gentle circles on her skin. It was a simple gesture, but it spoke volumes about his care for her, his desire to protect her from the harsh realities of his world while still wanting to share it with her. The morning after the gala, Abigail sat at her mother's kitchen table, her hands wrapped around a warm cup of coffee. Sunlight streamed through the lace curtains, casting delicate patterns on the worn tablecloth. Her mother bustled around the kitchen, the clanking of pots and pans punctuating the tense silence. "I need you to understand," Abigail began, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "What I feel for Matthew is real." Her mother's movements became more aggressive, the dishes rattling as she set them in the sink with unnecessary force. "Real?" she scoffed. "What's real is that he's a wealthy man who's probably seen dozens of young women come and go. You're just another pretty face to him." "That's not true," Abigail protested, pushing her coffee cup away. "You don't know him like I do. He's kind, thoughtful. Of course he is." Her mother turned around, wiping her hands on her apron. "Men like that know exactly what to say and do to get what they want. They've had years of practice." Abigail's younger sister, who had been quietly observing from the doorway, stepped into the kitchen. "Mom's right, Abby. These rich guys, they're all the same. They play with people's hearts because they can afford to." "Not Matthew," Abigail insisted, standing up. "He's different. If you would just give him a chance." "Different?" Her mother's laugh was harsh. "Child, I've been around long enough to know that men like him don't change. They see something pretty, they want it, they take it. Then they get bored and move on to the next thing." The words stung, but Abigail stood her ground. "I'm not a thing, Mom. I'm a person with my own mind and heart. And my heart is telling me that what Matthew and I have is worth fighting for." Her sister rolled her eyes. "Your heart is going to get you hurt. You really think someone like him is going to stick around? Wake up, Abby." Tears threatened to spill, but Abigail blinked them back. "I'm following my heart on this one. I just wish my family would support me instead of tearing me down." Her mother's expression softened slightly, but her words remained firm. "We're trying to protect you, baby. Men with money and power, they live in a different world. They don't see things the way we do. To them, everything is a transaction." Despite her family's warnings, Abigail spent more time with Matthew over the next few days. They shared quiet moments in his study, talking about books, dreams, and life. His presence felt like a balm to her wounded spirit, helping her forget the harsh words of her family. One afternoon, as she approached Matthew's office to bring him tea, she heard voices through the partially open door. She paused, not meaning to eavesdrop, but the serious tone of the conversation caught her attention. "The board is getting restless, Matthew," his lawyer was saying, his voice low but urgent. "We need to address these concerns before they escalate further." "I'm handling it," Matthew replied, his usually warm voice tight with tension. "The situation isn't as dire as they're making it out to be. $300 million is not a small problem," the lawyer insisted. "If we don't find a solution soon—" "I said I'm handling it." Matthew cut him off sharply. "I've weathered worse storms than this. The company will be fine." Abigail's hand trembled, causing the teacup to rattle slightly against the saucer. She heard footsteps approaching the door and quickly stepped back, trying to look as if she had just arrived. The lawyer emerged first, nodding curtly as he passed her. Matthew appeared in the doorway moments later, his face showing no sign of the stress she'd just overheard in his voice. "Ah, perfect timing," he smiled, taking the tea from her. "Just what I needed." Abigail watched him carefully, searching his face for any hint of the trouble she'd overheard. But Matthew was a master at maintaining his composure, and his expression revealed nothing. As they sat together that afternoon, Abigail found her thoughts drifting to the conversation she'd overheard. $300 million. The number seemed almost unreal to her. What kind of problems could involve such an enormous sum? And why hadn't Matthew mentioned anything about these business challenges? She wanted to ask him directly, to offer support, or at least understanding. But something held her back. The way he'd dismissed his lawyer's concerns so definitively made her wonder what else he might be keeping from her. Throughout their conversation about a new art exhibition he wanted to take her to, Abigail found herself studying his face more intently than usual. Was there tension around his eyes that she hadn't noticed before? Did his smile seem slightly strained? Or was she just seeing what she wanted to see, her family's warnings coloring her perceptions? Matthew must have noticed her distraction because he reached over and took her hand. "Is everything all right? You seem a million miles away." Abigail forced a smile. "Just thinking about things my family said," she replied, which wasn't entirely a lie. He squeezed her hand gently. "They'll come around eventually. Sometimes people need time to adjust to change." His words were meant to be reassuring, but they made Abigail wonder how much change was really coming, and what other secrets might be lurking beneath Matthew's calm exterior. The weight of uncertainty settled in her chest, a constant companion to the warmth she felt in his presence. The morning sun filtered through Abigail's kitchen window as she stirred her coffee absently, her mind replaying the overheard conversation between Matthew and his lawyer. The numbers and implications swirled in her head like the cream in her cup. $300 million. The sum was beyond her comprehension, yet it was spoken about as if it were a minor inconvenience. She needed someone to talk to, someone who would understand without judgment. After finishing her coffee, she picked up her phone and dialed a familiar number. "Sarah, are you free for lunch today?" 2 hours later, Abigail sat across from her old friend at their favorite diner. Sarah had worked alongside her as a maid for years before moving to another estate. The small restaurant was nothing fancy, but it felt comfortable and safe, a place where they could speak freely. Sarah studied Abigail's troubled expression over her plate of fries. "Okay, spill it. What's got you looking like you're carrying the weight of the world?" Abigail pushed her salad around with her fork. "It's Matthew. There's something. I don't know. I overheard him talking with his lawyer yesterday. They were discussing some kind of business problem, something about $300 million. Sarah's eyebrows shot up. "Million with an M? That's just it." Abigail sighed. "I knew he was wealthy, but this is different. It's like I'm suddenly realizing I don't really know who he is at all." "Well, honey." Sarah leaned forward, her voice gentle but firm. "We've both worked for wealthy people long enough to know they live in a different world. But that doesn't mean connections can't be real. My family thinks I'm being naive." Abigail admitted. "Maybe they're right." Sarah reached across the table and squeezed her friend's hand. "Listen to me. I've known you for 10 years, Abby. You're one of the smartest, most level-headed people I know. If you feel something real with this man, then it's worth exploring. Yes, his money and status might make things complicated, but since when did love come without complications?" Abigail felt tears prickling at the corners of her eyes. "I just wish he'd tell me the truth, whatever that is." "Then maybe it's time to ask him directly," Sarah suggested. "You deserve honesty, Abby. If he can't give you that, then maybe your family's concerns aren't completely off base." The conversation with Sarah gave Abigail the courage she needed. That evening, she texted Matthew asking to meet the next day. His response was prompt but oddly formal. "Of course, my office, 2 p.m. When Abigail arrived at his office the following afternoon, something felt different. Matthew sat behind his massive desk, looking more like a businessman than the warm, engaging man she'd grown to care for. His suit was impeccable as always, but there was a tension in his shoulders she hadn't noticed before. "Matthew," she began, settling into the chair across from him. "I feel like there's something growing between us, something unspoken, and I can't ignore it anymore." He looked at her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. "You're right," he finally said, standing up and walking to the window. "I haven't been entirely honest with you, Abigail." Her heart thumped painfully in her chest. "About what?" He turned to face her, his expression serious. "About who I really am. The truth is, I'm not just a wealthy businessman. I'm the CEO of Global Innovations Corporation. We're a multi-billion-dollar company with operations in 47 countries." Abigail felt the room spin slightly. Global Innovations Corporation. She'd seen their logo everywhere, from smartphones to electric cars. The company was a household name, one of the largest tech companies in the world. "I kept this from you," Matthew continued, his voice softening, "because I wanted to protect my privacy. In my position, people often approach me with ulterior motives. They see the wealth, the power, the status, but they don't see me. With you, I found something genuine, something real. I didn't want to risk losing that." Abigail stood up slowly, trying to process this revelation. "So when your lawyer was talking about $300 million, a minor setback in a new product launch," he explained, "something that seems enormous to most people, but in the scope of our operations, it's manageable." She walked to the window, needing space to think. The city sprawled below them, and somewhere out there was her tiny apartment, her simple life, her worried family. It felt like two different worlds colliding. "I understand if this changes things," Matthew said quietly, coming to stand beside her. "If it's too much." "It doesn't change how I feel about you," Abigail interrupted, surprising herself with the certainty in her voice. "The man I've gotten to know, the one who talks about books with passion, who listens to my dreams without judgment, who makes me feel seen. That's still you, isn't it?" Matthew's eyes softened with relief. "Yes, that's still me. That's always been me." But even as Abigail spoke the words, she felt uncertainty churning in her stomach. The implications of his true identity were staggering. This wasn't just about dating someone wealthy. This was about entering a world of corporate power, public scrutiny, and responsibilities she could hardly imagine. She looked up at Matthew, seeing him with new eyes. He was still the same man who had captured her heart with his gentleness and understanding, but now she saw the weight of his position in the slight crease between his eyebrows, in the careful way he held himself, in the subtle signs of stress she'd missed before. "I just need time," she said softly. "Time to process all of this." Matthew nodded, understanding in his eyes. "Take all the time you need. I'll be here when you're ready to talk more." As Abigail left his office, her mind was spinning with questions. Could she really handle being part of his world? Would she always feel like an outsider looking in? And most importantly, could their connection survive the vast differences in their lives? The morning sun cast long shadows through the estate's windows as Abigail went about her usual cleaning routine. Her mind was still processing Matthew's revelation from the day before, when voices from the study caught her attention. She recognized the deep baritone of Marcus Chen, one of Matthew's business partners, and another voice she didn't know. "The deadline is approaching," the unfamiliar voice said in a harsh whisper. "If we don't act now, we'll lose everything we've worked for." Abigail froze, her hand still gripping the duster. She knew she shouldn't eavesdrop, but something in their tone made her pause. "Listen," Marcus replied. "I've got people working on accessing the main server. Once we have those files, Matthew won't know what hit him until it's too late. The board will have no choice but to remove him." Abigail's heart began to race. She took a step backward, but her elbow knocked against a vase. Though she caught it before it fell, the slight noise was enough to alert the men inside. The door swung open, and Marcus's tall figure filled the doorway. His eyes narrowed when he saw her. "Well, well, what do we have here?" I was just cleaning," Abigail stammered, holding up her duster as proof. The other man appeared behind Marcus, shorter but with cold eyes that made Abigail's skin crawl. "The maid, isn't she? Matthew's latest interest?" Marcus stepped closer to Abigail, his expensive cologne overwhelming her senses. "Let me give you some friendly advice," he said, his voice deceptively soft. "Whatever you think you might have heard, forget it. Some conversations aren't meant for everyone's ears. It would be unfortunate if anything happened to your position here, or worse." Abigail's hands trembled, but she lifted her chin. "I need to get back to work." "Smart girl," the shorter man sneered. "Keep it that way." As soon as she was out of their sight, Abigail broke into a run. She had to find Matthew. She knew he was in an important investor meeting, but this couldn't wait. Her heels clicked against the marble floors as she hurried to the conference room. Through the glass walls, she could see Matthew standing at the head of the table, his presence commanding as he addressed a room full of suited executives. When he caught sight of her anxious face, his presentation faltered for just a moment. Abigail waited outside, her heart pounding. After what felt like hours but was probably only minutes, the investors filed out. Matthew appeared in the doorway, concern etched on his features. "Abigail, what's wrong?" She glanced around nervously before speaking. "Can we talk somewhere private?" Matthew led her to his office, closing the door behind them. As Abigail recounted what she'd overheard, she watched his usually composed expression crack. His jaw tightened, and for the first time since she'd known him, real anger flashed in his eyes. "They threatened you?" His voice was dangerously quiet. Not directly, but... Abigail wrapped her arms around herself. "Matthew, they're planning something. Something about accessing servers and removing you from the board." Matthew ran a hand through his silver hair, his calm demeanor slipping further. "I've suspected something like this for weeks, but I didn't think they'd move so quickly." He moved closer to Abigail, taking her hands in his. "I'm so sorry you've been dragged into this. I promise you I won't let them hurt you." "I'm scared," she admitted. "Not just for myself, but for you too." "Don't be," he said firmly. "I've dealt with corporate takeover attempts before. I'll handle this." Before he could say more, his office door burst open. Marcus strode in, his face twisted with anger. "Matthew, we need to talk. Alone." Matthew didn't move from Abigail's side. "Anything you need to say can be said in front of her." Marcus's lip curled. "Fine. Have it your way. Hand over access to the development server for Project Aurora, or things will get very unpleasant for everyone involved." "Is that a threat, Marcus?" Matthew's voice was steel. "Call it what you want, but remember, you're not the only one with something to lose here." Marcus's gaze flickered to Abigail meaningfully. Something dangerous flashed in Matthew's eyes. He stepped forward, his presence suddenly filling the room. "Let me be very clear," he said, his voice low and controlled. "If you ever threaten someone I care about again, you won't just lose your position on the board, you'll lose everything. I have enough evidence of your previous indiscretions to ensure you never work in this industry again. Do we understand each other?" Marcus's face paled slightly. "You're bluffing. Try me." Matthew's words were quiet but carried absolute certainty. "Now get out of my office and expect to hear from my lawyers." Marcus stood there for a moment longer, his fists clenched, before turning on his heel and storming out. Abigail stared at Matthew, seeing a new side of him. Not just the gentle man she'd come to care for, but a leader who commanded respect and wasn't afraid to protect what mattered to him. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice softening as he turned back to her. "Yes," she said, surprised to find that she meant it. "I've never seen you like that before. I'm sorry if I frightened you." "You didn't," she assured him. "Actually, it was impressive, the way you handled him." Matthew's expression grew serious. "Abigail, what you did today, coming to warn me, it means more than you know. But I need you to be careful. These people are dangerous when cornered." "What will you do?" "What I have to," he replied. "Protect my company, my employees, and most importantly, you." The evening after the confrontation in Matthew's office, Abigail found herself in his private study. The room was warm and intimate, with leather-bound books lining the walls and a crackling fireplace casting dancing shadows. Matthew sat across from her, his silver hair catching the golden light as he spread several documents across his mahogany desk. "I need your help, Abigail," he said, his voice serious but gentle. "You have access to parts of the estate that I don't, and you notice things others might miss." Abigail leaned forward, her heart quickening. "What do you need me to do?" "Keep your eyes and ears open. Marcus and his associates often meet in the East Wing conference room. They think no one pays attention to the cleaning staff." He paused, looking concerned. "But I don't want you putting yourself in danger." "I want to help," Abigail said firmly. "I'm already involved, and I care about what happens to you and your company." Matthew's expression softened. "I know you do. That's why I trust you." He handed her a small notebook. "If you notice anything suspicious, conversations, unusual meetings, unfamiliar faces, write it down. But be discreet." Over the next few days, Abigail went about her usual cleaning duties, but now with heightened awareness. She noticed Marcus meeting with different men in expensive suits, their voices always hushed. She documented times, descriptions, and snippets of conversations she managed to overhear. One evening, while dusting the conference room after hours, she discovered a crumpled note in the waste paper basket. The paper contained what looked like server access codes. Her hands trembling, she carefully smoothed out the paper and tucked it into her pocket. Later that night, she met Matthew in his study again. The fire was lower now, and rain pattered against the windows. As she handed him the note, their fingers brushed, sending a flutter through her chest. "This could be exactly what we needed," Matthew said, studying the paper. Then he looked up at her, his eyes full of gratitude. "You're remarkable, you know that?" Abigail felt her cheeks warm. "I just want to help." Matthew set the paper aside and moved to sit in one of the leather armchairs by the fire, gesturing for her to take the other. "Why?" he asked softly. "Why risk so much to help me?" Abigail settled into the chair, considering her answer. "Because I believe in you," she said finally. "Not just as a businessman, but as a person." Something vulnerable crossed Matthew's face. He stared into the flames for a long moment before speaking. "I wasn't always this person, you know. You, the wealthy CEO, the man with everything." His voice grew distant, lost in memory. "I grew up in a small apartment above my father's failing hardware store. We could barely make rent most months." Abigail watched him, seeing past the expensive suit to the man beneath. "What changed?" "Hard work, determination, and a refusal to accept that my circumstances defined me." He smiled slightly. "I worked 3 jobs to put myself through college, lived on ramen noodles and coffee, started my first company in a garage with second-hand computers." "That must have been incredibly difficult," Abigail said softly. Matthew nodded. "It was, but it taught me something valuable. That success isn't about where you come from, it's about where you're determined to go. He turned to look at her directly. That's what I see in you, Abigail. That same determination. Warmth spread through Abigail's chest. My family doesn't understand, she admitted. They think I'm just chasing some fairy tale. And what do you think? I think... She paused, gathering her courage. I think I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. Matthew reached across the space between their chairs and took her hand. His touch was warm and steady. So do I. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the fire and listening to the rain. For the first time since learning about Matthew's true identity, Abigail felt completely at ease. The gap between their worlds seemed to narrow, filled by understanding and shared purpose. Would you like some tea? Matthew asked eventually, rising from his chair. That would be nice. Abigail smiled. As he prepared the tea at a small side table, Abigail observed him, the way he moved with quiet confidence, how his hands were steady and sure. This was a man who had built himself from nothing, who understood the value of hard work and perseverance. She felt a deep admiration for him, not because of his wealth or status, but because of his character. Matthew returned with 2 steaming cups, handling the delicate china with care. Earl Grey, he said, handing her a cup. My mother used to say it was good for the soul. She sounds wise, Abigail said, accepting the tea gratefully. She was. Matthew settled back into his chair. She taught me that true wealth isn't about money. It's about having people in your life who believe in you, who stand by you when things get difficult. Their eyes met over their teacups, and Abigail felt something shift between them. This wasn't just about helping him save his company anymore. It was about 2 people who had found something rare and precious in each other. Understanding, trust, and the beginning of something deeper. As the evening wore on, they talked about their hopes, their fears, and their dreams. Matthew shared stories about his early business ventures, including the failures that had taught him the most valuable lessons. Abigail told him about her own aspirations, about wanting to make a difference in the world beyond just surviving in it. The grandfather clock in the corner struck 11, its deep chimes filling the room. Abigail realized she had never felt so comfortable, so completely herself, as she did in this moment. The vast estate outside, with all its grandeur and complications, seemed far away. Here, in this warm study with Matthew, she had found a place where she truly belonged. Looking at Matthew's face in the firelight, Abigail saw not the powerful CEO or the wealthy businessman, but simply a man who had fought his way up from nothing, who understood the value of dreams and the courage it takes to pursue them. In his eyes, she saw a reflection of her own determination, her own desire to rise above circumstances and expectations. The rain continued to fall outside, creating a cozy barrier between them and the rest of the world. For now, they could forget about the threats they faced and the challenges ahead. This evening was theirs, a quiet moment of connection in the midst of uncertainty. The morning sun filtered through Abigail's kitchen window as she prepared breakfast, her movements mechanical and distracted. The sound of footsteps behind her made her tense. She knew what was coming. Her younger sister had invited herself over, and the familiar weight of family judgment settled over the room like a heavy blanket. "You're making a huge mistake, Abigail," her sister said, leaning against the counter. "A man his age? What are you thinking?" Abigail's hands trembled as she stirred the oatmeal. "You don't know him like I do." "Oh, please," her sister scoffed. "We all know exactly what this looks like. A young black woman getting involved with a rich older man. People are talking, Abigail. They're saying terrible things." The words stung, but before Abigail could respond, their mother walked in, her face tight with disappointment. "Baby girl, we're worried about you. This isn't right, and you know it." Abigail turned to face them, her heart pounding. "Matthew is different. He's kind. He's genuine. He's using you." Her mother interrupted. "You think a man like that, with all his money and power, really sees you as an equal? You're nothing but a trophy to him, something pretty to show off at his fancy parties." "That's not true," Abigail whispered, but doubt began to creep in. The memory of those whispered comments at the gala floated back to her. Her sister moved closer, her voice softer but no less cutting. "You're turning into one of those women we always warned you about. A gold digger, Abigail. Is that really what you want people to think of you?" Tears pricked at Abigail's eyes. "You don't understand. There's more to it than that." "What's there to understand?" her mother demanded. "He's old enough to be your father. What kind of future can he give you? By the time you're ready to really enjoy life, he'll be in a nursing home." The words hit Abigail like physical blows. She gripped the counter, trying to steady herself. The investigation into the business threats, the quiet evenings with Matthew, the way he looked at her. It all seemed to blur and shift under the weight of her family's disapproval. Later that day, she sat in Matthew's study, her heart heavy. He could sense something was wrong, his concerned gaze following her as she paced the room. "Matthew," she began, her voice trembling. "I think I need some time, some space to think things through." The pain that flashed across his face made her chest tighten, but he nodded slowly. "I understand," he said quietly. "Take all the time you need." His gracious response only made it harder. Abigail wanted him to fight, to argue, to give her a reason to stay. Instead, his respect for her wishes reminded her of exactly why she had fallen for him in the first place. The days that followed were a blur of confusion and internal struggle. Abigail threw herself into her work, trying to drown out the conflicting voices in her head. Her family seemed pleased with her decision to step back, but their satisfaction only made her feel worse. One evening, as she sat alone in her living room, her young son climbed into her lap. His small hands patted her cheeks, and he looked at her with innocent eyes. "Mummy says you're my daddy," he whispered again, just as he had before. Abigail froze, those simple words cutting through all her doubt and confusion. She remembered how Matthew had first connected with her son, how he'd gotten down on his knees to play with toy cars, how he always remembered to bring small treats and books. It wasn't just about her anymore. It was about the family they were becoming. She thought about the way Matthew looked at her son, with such genuine warmth and care. He never tried to replace anyone or push his way in. He simply offered love and support without asking for anything in return. The realization hit her like a wave. Her son had seen what she'd been too afraid to fully acknowledge, the deep, meaningful connection they all shared. Holding her son close, Abigail finally understood that the bond she shared with Matthew wasn't about age or money or status. It was about finding someone who saw her for who she truly was, who respected her independence while offering unwavering support. Someone who could love not just her, but her child as well. The noise of her family's judgment began to fade, replaced by the quiet certainty of her own heart. She knew what she had to do. The path forward wasn't about choosing between her family and Matthew. It was about being true to herself and the love she'd found, unexpected and precious as it was. Her son snuggled closer, yawning softly. "When can we see Matthew again?" he asked sleepily. Abigail kissed the top of his head, a smile finally breaking through her tears. The answer was clear now, written in her heart and confirmed by her son's innocent wisdom. The time for doubt was over. The early morning sun cast long shadows across Matthew's study as Abigail stood in the doorway, her heart pounding. Matthew sat at his desk, looking tired and worn, papers scattered before him. When he looked up and saw her, his eyes softened, but uncertainty clouded his features. "I'm sorry," Abigail said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I was wrong to push you away." Matthew set down his pen and turned to face her fully. "Abigail!" She stepped into the room, wringing her hands. "These past few days have been awful. I let my family's words get into my head, make me doubt everything we have. But being away from you—" Her voice cracked. "It only showed me how much I need you in my life." Matthew rose from his chair, moving toward her with careful steps. "Your family's concerns aren't entirely unfounded," he said gently. "The age difference, the wealth gap, these aren't small matters." "I know," Abigail replied, meeting his gaze. "But what matters more is how you make me feel, how you treat my son, the way you see me, not as a maid, not as someone beneath you, but as an equal." Emotion flickered across Matthew's face. He reached for her hands, holding them in his. "I will always be here for you, Abigail. Whatever challenges come our way, we'll face them together." She squeezed his hands. "The business threats, I want to help. I know I can't do much, but I want to stand by your side through this." A small smile tugged at Matthew's lips. "You already help more than you know. Your insight, your strength, they mean everything to me." Over the next few weeks, they threw themselves into investigating the corrupt dealings threatening Matthew's company. Abigail proved invaluable, her attention to detail catching things others missed. She noticed patterns in the paperwork, remembered snippets of conversations that turned out to be crucial. One evening, as they pored over documents together, Abigail discovered a series of suspicious transactions. "Look at these dates," she said, pointing to the papers. "They all correspond with the meetings those men were having." Matthew leaned in, his expression growing serious. "This could be the evidence we need. These transactions show a clear pattern of embezzlement." They worked late into the night, building their case. When they finally presented their findings to the board of directors, the evidence was overwhelming. The corrupt individuals were exposed, their criminal activities laid bare for all to see. The aftermath was swift and decisive. The perpetrators were removed from their positions and faced legal consequences. Matthew's company emerged stronger than ever, his reputation not just intact, but enhanced by his handling of the crisis. What surprised Abigail most was the change in how others viewed her. The same people who had whispered about her at the gala now sought her out, impressed by her role in uncovering the truth. Even her family began to see Matthew in a different light. Her sister visited one afternoon, looking uncomfortable but determined. "I was wrong about him," she admitted. "The way he handled everything, how he treated you through it all. Maybe I judged too quickly." Abigail smiled, remembering how Matthew had insisted on including her in every step of the process, valuing her input and defending her against any criticism. "He's not what anyone expected," she said. "He's so much more." Her mother took longer to come around, but even she couldn't deny the positive changes in Abigail's life. During a family dinner, she watched as Matthew helped Abigail's son with his homework, patience and kindness evident in every interaction. "He really does care about both of you," her mother said quietly, standing beside Abigail in the kitchen. "He does," Abigail agreed. "And I care about him. Age, money, status, none of that matters compared to what we have." The business crisis had tested them, but it had also strengthened their bond. Abigail found herself growing more confident, more assured in her place beside Matthew. She wasn't just the maid who had caught his eye, she was his partner, his equal in every way that mattered. One evening, as they sat in his study, Matthew took her hand. "You know, When all this started, I was afraid of losing everything I'd built. But now I realize something. None of it would mean anything without you beside me." Abigail leaned against him, feeling the steady beat of his heart. "We're stronger together," she said simply. And they were. Through the investigation, through the exposure of corruption, through the judgment and whispers, they had proven that their love wasn't about age or wealth or status. It was about two people who saw past the surface to find something real and lasting. The respect they had earned, from the board, from society, from her family, wasn't just about solving the business crisis. It was about showing the world that true partnership knows no boundaries, that love can bridge any gap when it's built on trust, respect, and understanding. In the warm light of the study, surrounded by the remnants of their successful investigation, Abigail felt a deep sense of peace. She had chosen to follow her heart, to fight for what she believed in, and in doing so, she had found not just love, but her own strength. Matthew smiled at her, and in his eyes she saw their future, challenges and all, stretching out before them, bright with possibility. The autumn breeze rustled through the trees as Abigail sat on her mother's front porch, watching the golden leaves dance across the yard. The past few weeks had brought dramatic changes, not just in Matthew's business world, but in how her family viewed their relationship. Her mother stepped out onto the porch, carrying 2 steaming mugs of coffee. The familiar scent of hazelnut filled the air as she handed one to Abigail. For a moment, they sat in comfortable silence, a stark contrast to their heated arguments from just months ago. "I've been doing a lot of thinking," her mother finally said, her voice softer than usual. She wrapped her hands around her mug, seeking its warmth. "About you and Matthew, about how I've acted." Abigail's heart skipped a beat. She'd noticed her mother's changing attitude since the scandal had been resolved, but they hadn't directly addressed it until now. "The way you handled everything," her mother continued, standing by him, helping uncover the truth. "It showed me something." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "I was wrong about him, Abigail, and I was wrong about you." Tears pricked at Abigail's eyes. Her mother rarely admitted to being wrong about anything. "I see how he looks at you," her mother said, turning to face her daughter. "Like you're the most precious thing in his world, and the way you've grown, you're stronger now, more confident. That's not just success or money, that's love." Abigail felt a weight lifting from her shoulders, a weight she hadn't even realized she'd been carrying. "It means so much to hear you say that, Mama." Her mother reached over and took her hand. "I'm sorry, baby. I was so focused on protecting you that I couldn't see what was right in front of me. You and Matthew, you bring out the best in each other." Their conversation was interrupted by the sound of laughter from inside the house. Through the window, they could see Matthew in the living room, sitting cross-legged on the floor with Abigail's younger sister. They were attempting to assemble a puzzle that her nephew had abandoned, and Matthew was telling some story that had her sister in stitches. "Would you look at that?" her mother mused, a smile playing at her lips. "Never thought I'd see a CEO sitting on my floor doing puzzles." "He's full of surprises," Abigail said softly. Later that evening, as the family gathered for dinner, the atmosphere was noticeably different from their previous family meals. Gone were the tense silences and pointed remarks. Instead, her younger sister was eagerly showing Matthew photos from her recent business trip, while her mother insisted on filling his plate with seconds. "You're too skinny," she declared, spooning more mac and cheese onto his plate. "All that fancy business food isn't giving you proper nutrition." Matthew accepted the food with grace, shooting an amused look at Abigail. "I haven't had home cooking this good in years," he said sincerely. Abigail watched as her mother practically glowed with pride. It was strange and wonderful to see these two parts of her life finally meshing together. After dinner, while helping with the dishes, her younger sister nudged her playfully. "You know, I actually like him," she admitted. "He's nothing like I thought he'd be. The way he handled that whole scandal thing, that took real integrity. And the way he treats Abigail," their mother added from where she was putting away leftovers. "That's what matters most. He sees her for who she is." Matthew, who had been chatting with Abigail's nephew in the living room, joined them in the kitchen. He looked more relaxed than Abigail had ever seen him in a family setting, his tie loosened and sleeves rolled up. "Everything okay in here?" he asked, his hand naturally finding its way to the small of Abigail's back. "Just fine," her mother answered warmly. "We were just saying how nice it is to have you here." The sincerity in her voice made Matthew pause. Abigail could see the emotion in his eyes as he processed this acceptance from a family that had once rejected him so thoroughly. "Thank you," he said quietly. I haven't had much family in my life. This means more than you know." Her mother stepped forward and, to everyone's surprise, pulled Matthew into a hug. "Well, you've got family now," she said firmly, "whether you like it or not." Matthew's arms slowly came up to return the embrace, and Abigail felt tears welling up in her eyes again. Her sister squeezed her hand, both of them witnessing this powerful moment of reconciliation. As the evening wound down, they all moved to the back porch. The stars were just beginning to appear in the darkening sky, and the air was filled with the sound of crickets and distant laughter from neighborhood children. "I never thought I'd have this," Matthew confessed quietly to Abigail as they sat together on the porch swing. "A family dinner, people who care enough to feed me too much and tease me about my work hours." Abigail leaned into him, feeling the steady rise and fall of his chest. "They're your family now too," she reminded him. Her mother, overhearing this, nodded in agreement. "That's right," she said, settling into her favorite rocking chair. "And family looks out for each other, no matter what." As the night grew deeper, Abigail looked around at her loved ones, her mother who had found it in her heart to change, her sister who now treated Matthew like a brother, and Matthew himself, who had opened himself up to being part of something bigger than his business empire. The transformation in their relationships felt like a miracle, but Abigail knew it was more than that. It was the result of love, understanding, and the willingness to look past surface differences to see the truth in people's hearts. In the warm glow of the porch light, surrounded by the people she loved most in the world, Abigail felt a deep sense of contentment. The journey hadn't been easy, but every struggle had led them here, to this moment of perfect harmony, where age and status no longer mattered, where family meant more than blood, and where love had proven stronger than prejudice. The autumn evening wrapped the estate in a gentle golden light as Matthew led Abigail through the garden. The air was crisp, carrying the sweet scent of late-blooming roses and fresh-cut grass. He had asked her to meet him here after work, and something about his voice on the phone had made her heart flutter with anticipation. "I remember the first time I saw you here," Matthew said, softly, his hand warm in hers as they walked along the winding path. "You were tending to these very roses, and the sunlight caught your face just so. I couldn't look away." Abigail smiled, remembering that day too. "I thought you were just another businessman passing through," she admitted. "How wrong I was." They reached a beautiful gazebo that Matthew had decorated with tiny twinkling lights. A small table was set up inside, complete with champagne and her favorite dessert, chocolate-covered strawberries. "Matthew, what's all this?" she asked, though her heart was already racing with possibility. He guided her to sit down, his hands trembling slightly, as he poured them each a glass of champagne. "Abigail," he began, his voice thick with emotion. "These past months have taught me more about love and life than all my years before." He reached across the table to take her hands in his. "When we first met, I was just a lonely man who had forgotten what it meant to truly connect with someone. You changed that. You showed me that real love isn't about age or wealth or what others think. It's about finding someone who sees your soul and accepts it completely." Tears began to well up in Abigail's eyes as Matthew stood and moved to her side of the table. His normally confident demeanor gave way to vulnerable sincerity as he lowered himself to one knee. "All my success, all my achievements, they meant nothing until I had someone to share them with. Someone who loved me, not for what I own, but for who I am." His voice cracked slightly as he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. "The world tried to tell us we were wrong for each other. Your family, my business associates, society, they all had their opinions. But you taught me something precious, that love is worth fighting for, worth standing up for." Opening the box, he revealed a stunning, yet elegant diamond ring. "Abigail Williams, would you do me the extraordinary honor of becoming my wife? Will you continue this adventure with me, building a life filled with love, trust, and endless possibilities?" Abigail's hand flew to her mouth, tears now flowing freely down her cheeks. The ring sparkled in the soft lighting, but it was the love in Matthew's eyes that truly took her breath away. "Yes," she whispered, then louder. "Yes, Matthew. 1,000 times yes." His hands shook as he slipped the ring onto her finger, and when he stood, she threw her arms around his neck. He held her close, and she could feel his heart beating as rapidly as her own. "I love you," she murmured against his chest. "Not because of what you have, but because of who you are. This wonderful, kind, strong man who fought for us just as hard as I did." Matthew pulled back slightly to look into her eyes. "You've given me something I never thought I'd have, a chance at real happiness, at a love that sees past all the superficial things." They sat together in the gazebo, sharing the strawberries and champagne, talking about their future. The evening air grew cooler, but neither noticed, wrapped up in their joy and each other's warmth. "We should tell your family first," Matthew said, his thumb gently caressing her hand where the ring now sat. "They've come so far in accepting us, I want them to be part of this celebration." Abigail nodded, imagining her mother's face when she heard the news. "They'll be overjoyed," she said confidently. "Your family now, remember?" As they discussed their future plans, their conversation wandered through dreams of their life together. They talked about traveling the world, about combining their different lives into something new and beautiful, about all the adventures they would share. "I want a small wedding," Abigail said thoughtfully. "Something intimate, with just the people who matter most." Matthew smiled, pulling her closer. "Whatever you want, my love. As long as I'm marrying you, the details don't matter." The night deepened around them, stars appearing one by one in the velvet sky. The twinkling lights in the gazebo created a magical atmosphere, as if they were in their own private universe where nothing existed but their love and their promises to each other. "You know," Matthew said, his voice tender, "I used to think success was measured by the size of my bank account or the number of deals I closed, but sitting here with you, I realize that true success is finding someone who makes your soul feel at home." Abigail leaned into him, her heart full to bursting. "And home is exactly what we've found in each other," she replied softly. Later that night, as they walked hand in hand back to the house, Abigail couldn't help but marvel at how far they'd come. From their first tentative conversations to this moment of perfect certainty, they had weathered every storm together and emerged stronger. The ring on her finger caught the moonlight, but it was merely a symbol of something far more precious, the deep, unshakable bond they had formed. A bond that had proved stronger than age differences, family disapproval, and all the other obstacles they had faced. As they reached the house, Matthew pulled her close for one more kiss. "Thank you," he whispered against her lips. "For what?" she asked, looking up into his eyes. "For believing in us, for showing me that love doesn't care about numbers, whether they're age or dollars, for being brave enough to follow your heart despite what everyone else thought." Abigail smiled, touching his face gently. "Thank you for being worth it," she replied simply. They stood there for a moment longer, two souls who had found each other against all odds, now ready to begin the next chapter of their journey together. Their engagement wasn't just a promise of marriage, it was a testament to the power of true love, a love that had transformed both their lives in ways they never could have imagined. The future stretched before them, bright with possibility and rich with the promise of shared dreams. They had overcome every obstacle, proved every doubter wrong, and now stood on the threshold of a new adventure, together, just as they were always meant to be. Abigail stood at her bedroom window, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of pink and gold. Tomorrow she would become Mrs. Matthew Jameson, but tonight she needed this quiet moment to herself, to reflect on the incredible journey that had brought her here. She touched the delicate lace of her wedding dress hanging nearby, remembering how far she'd come from the days when she'd been just a maid in Matthew's estate. Back then, she'd been so unsure of herself, constantly questioning whether she deserved the kind of love Matthew offered. "Look at you now," she whispered to her reflection in the window. The woman staring back at her wasn't the same person who had once shrunk under her family's disapproval. Her eyes held a quiet confidence, earned through every challenge she'd faced and overcome. She thought about those early days when her younger sister had mockingly called Matthew just a lonely old man. The memory no longer stung like it used to. Instead, it reminded her of how wrong they'd all been about him, about their love, about everything. Moving to her bed, Abigail sat down and opened the journal she'd been keeping since she first met Matthew. Its pages held the story of their love, every doubt, every triumph, every moment of growth. She traced her fingers over an entry from those difficult early days. "Sometimes I wonder if they're right. Is the age difference too much? Am I fooling myself? But then I see the way he looks at me, and none of that matters." A gentle knock at her door interrupted her thoughts. "Come in," she called, knowing who it would be. Matthew stepped inside, his eyes softening when he saw her. "I thought I might find you deep in thought," he said, crossing the room to sit beside her. "Just reflecting," she replied, leaning against his shoulder. "Remember when everyone thought we were crazy?" He chuckled softly. "I remember, but you never let their doubts stop you. That's one of the countless reasons I fell in love with you." "I was so scared back then," Abigail admitted. "Not of loving you, but of not being enough, of letting other people's opinions matter more than what I knew in my heart." Matthew took her hand, his thumb brushing over her engagement ring. "And look at you now. You've become such a strong, confident woman. Though you always were, you just needed to believe it yourself." Abigail smiled, remembering the day she'd finally stood up to her family. "It wasn't just about proving them wrong. It was about proving to myself that I deserved to be happy, to be loved the way you love me. You deserve everything," Matthew said softly. "I wake up every day grateful that you chose me, that you fought for us when it would have been easier to walk away." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the last rays of sunlight fade from the sky. Tomorrow would bring the ceremony, the celebration, the official beginning of their life together. But this quiet moment felt just as significant. "What are you thinking about for our future?" Abigail asked, turning to face him. Matthew's eyes crinkled with warmth. "I'm thinking about morning coffee on our balcony, about holiday dinners with your family, who, by the way, now seem to like me better than they like you." They both laughed at that. "I'm thinking about building a life that makes you as happy as you've made me." "I'm already happy," Abigail said, squeezing his hand. "When I look at our future, I see all the little moments. The quiet ones. Like this. The ones where we're just us, no pretenses, no need to prove anything to anyone." Matthew pulled her close, pressing a kiss to her temple. "That's exactly what I want too. Just us, building our life together, one day at a time." The room had grown dark, but neither moved to turn on the lights. In the gathering dusk, Abigail felt a profound sense of peace. She'd grown so much since that first day she'd met Matthew, from a woman who doubted her worth to someone who knew exactly who she was and what she deserved. "I should go," Matthew said eventually, standing up. "Bad luck to see the bride too much before the wedding." Abigail walked him to the door, where he turned to face her one last time. "Tomorrow," he said simply, his voice full of promise. "Tomorrow," she agreed, watching as he disappeared down the hallway. Alone again, Abigail returned to the window. The stars were coming out now, bright points of light in the darkening sky. Tomorrow would bring its own magic, but tonight was for remembering the path that had led her here. Every step, every struggle, every moment of growth that had transformed her into the woman she was now. She was ready for this next chapter, ready to become Matthew's wife, ready for whatever adventures lay ahead. Because she knew now, with absolute certainty, that love wasn't about age or wealth or what other people thought. It was about finding someone who saw you completely and loved you anyway. Someone who made you want to be the best version of yourself. The late morning sun streamed through the stained glass windows, casting a rainbow of colors across the church's wooden pews. Abigail stood at the entrance, her white dress flowing gracefully around her. Her hands trembled slightly as they gripped the bouquet of fresh roses. The music began to play, and the church doors opened wide. Every head turned to watch as Abigail took her first step down the aisle. Her eyes locked with Matthew's, and suddenly the butterflies in her stomach settled. He stood tall and handsome at the altar, his eyes glistening with emotion. Each step brought her closer to her future. She noticed her mother wiping away tears in the front row, a proud smile now replacing the doubt that had once clouded her face. Her younger sister sat beside their mother, beaming with genuine happiness, a far cry from her initial skepticism. The simple decorations of white flowers and soft ribbons lined the aisle, just as they had planned. They hadn't needed elaborate arrangements or excessive grandeur. Their love was about the genuine connection they shared, not about putting on a show. When she reached Matthew, he extended his hand to her. His touch was warm and steady, grounding her in this perfect moment. They turned to face each other as the minister began the ceremony. Their vows were heartfelt and honest. Matthew's voice carried clearly through the church as he promised to love and cherish her for all their days. When it was Abigail's turn, her voice grew stronger with each word, filled with the certainty of their love. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," the minister declared. "You may kiss the bride." Matthew leaned in, and their lips met in a sweet, tender kiss. The church erupted in applause and cheers, the sound of joy and celebration filling every corner of the sacred space. As they turned to face their loved ones, hand in hand, Abigail's heart swelled with happiness. This was their moment of triumph, a love that had overcome every obstacle, grown stronger through every challenge, and brought their families together in celebration. The honeymoon suite overlooked the crystal-clear waters of the Caribbean, waves gently lapping at the pristine white sand below. Abigail and Matthew stood on their private balcony, his arm wrapped lovingly around her waist as they watched the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. "I never imagined I could be this happy," Abigail said softly, leaning into Matthew's embrace. Their first week as husband and wife had been filled with moments that took her breath away. Swimming in secluded coves, romantic dinners under the stars, and long walks on moonlit beaches. Matthew kissed her temple gently. "You deserve every bit of happiness, my love." As they settled into a comfortable lounge chair together, Abigail found herself reflecting on her journey. She remembered the uncertain woman she'd been when they first met, the maid who'd kept her eyes down, afraid to dream too big. Now she carried herself with confidence, knowing her worth wasn't determined by her job title or anyone else's opinions. "You know," she said, intertwining her fingers with Matthew's, "when I think about who I was before I met you, it's like looking at a different person. I was so afraid of what everyone would think, so worried about fitting into other people's expectations." Matthew squeezed her hand. "You've always been extraordinary, Abigail. You just needed to believe it yourself." She smiled, knowing he was right. Their love had given her the courage to stand tall, to face her family's disapproval, and to fight for what she wanted. Together, they'd overcome every obstacle. Age differences, social expectations, family pressure, and even business threats. Standing up, they walked to the balcony railing again, their hands naturally finding each other. The setting sun cast a golden glow across their faces as they looked towards the horizon. In that moment, Abigail felt complete certainty. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, stronger for the love they shared. Thank you for being here. If something in this story stayed with you, I'd love to see you again. Subscribe, and tomorrow I'll bring you another story crafted with heart.